American English, or United States English, is the set of dialects of the English language native to the United States. English is the most widely spoken language in the United States and is the common language used by the federal government. Considered the de facto language of the country because of its widespread use, English has been given official status by 30 of the 50 state governments. As an example, while both Spanish and English have equivalent status in the local courts of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, under federal law, English is the official language for any matters being referred to the United States District Court for the territory. The use of English in the United States is a result of British colonization. The first wave of English-speaking settlers arrived in North America during the 17th century, followed by further migrations in the 18th and 19th centuries. Since then, American English has been influenced by the languages of West Africa, the Native American population, German, Dutch, Irish, Spanish, and other languages of successive waves of immigrants to the United States. Any American English accent or sound system perceived as free from recognizably local, ethnic, or cultural characteristics is popularly called General American. The term supposes a mainstream form of American English, though linguists do not actually identify any single dialect as uniform and widespread enough to be regarded as the standard for English in the United States. More precisely, American English comprises a spectrum of different dialects, regional variation. While written American English is standardized across the country, there are several recognizable variations in the spoken language, both in pronunciation and in vernacular vocabulary. General American is the name given to any American accent that is often considered relatively free of noticeable regional influences. Some consider the accent of English speakers from Ohio to be the most relatable and neutral version of American English, and it is thus taught to many news broadcasters and other television personalities across the country. East Coast. The East Coast comprises 3 or 4 traditionally and linguistically distinct regions, each of which possessing English varieties distinct from each other as well as quite internally diverse. New England, the New York metropolitan area, the Mid-Atlantic states, and the South. After the Civil War, the settlement of the Western territories by migrants from the eastern U.S. led to dialect mixing and leveling, so that regional dialects are most strongly differentiated along the eastern seaboard. The Connecticut River and Long Island Sound is usually regarded as the southern, western extent of New England speech, which has its roots in the speech of the Puritans from East Anglia who settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Potomac River generally divides a group of northern coastal dialects from the beginning of the coastal southern dialect area. In between these two rivers several local variations exist, chief among them the one that prevails in and around New York City and northern New Jersey, which developed on a Dutch substratum after the English conquered New Amsterdam. The main features of coastal southern speech can be traced to the speech of the English from the West Country who settled in Virginia after leaving England at the time of the English Civil War. Midwest. A distinctive speech pattern also appears near the border between Canada and the United States, centered on the Great Lakes region. Linguists call this region the Inland North, as defined by its unique vowel shift, occurring in the same region whose standard Midwestern speech was the basis for General American in the mid-20th century. Those not from this area frequently confuse it with the North Midland dialect treated below, referring to both, plus areas to the immediate west of the Great Lakes region, all collectively as the Midwest, a common but vaguely delineated term for what is now the central or north-central United States. The so-called Minnesotan dialect is also prevalent in the cultural upper Midwest. and is characterized by influences from the German and Scandinavian settlers of the region. In parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio, another dialect known as Pennsylvania Dutch English is also spoken. Midland, between the traditional American North and South, is what linguists have long called the Midland. This geographically overlaps with some states situated in the lower Midwest. West of the Appalachian Mountains begins the broad zone of modern-day Midland speech. This is divided into two discrete subdivisions: the North Midland that begins north of the Ohio River Valley area, and the South Midland speech, which to the American ear has some slight trace of a Southern accent. Sometimes the former region is designated simply Midland, and the latter is labeled as Highlands Southern. The North Midland speech continues to expand westward until it becomes the closely related Western dialect, which contains Pacific Northwest English, as well as California English. Although in the immediate San Francisco area some older speakers do not possess the Cock-Court merger and thus retain the distinction between words, such as cotton court, which reflects a historical Mid-Atlantic heritage. The South Midland or Highland Southern dialect follows the Ohio River in a generally southwesterly direction, moves across Arkansas and Oklahoma west of the Mississippi, and peters out in West Texas. It is a version of the Midland speech that has assimilated some coastal Southern forms, although no longer region-specific. African American Vernacular English, which remains prevalent among African Americans, has a close relationship to Southern varieties of American English and has greatly influenced everyday speech of many Americans. The island state of Hawaii, though primarily English-speaking, is also home to a Creole language known commonly as Hawaiian Pidgin. Dialect development in the United States has further been notably influenced by the distinctive speech of such important cultural centers as Baltimore, Boston, Buffalo, Charleston, Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, New Orleans, New York City, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, etc., which impose their linguistic marks on the surrounding areas. Phonology. Compared with English as spoken in England, North American English is more homogeneous, and any accent that exhibits a majority of the most common phonological features is known as General American. Some distinctive accents can be found on the East Coast, partly because these areas were in close contact with England and imitated prestigious varieties of English at a time when these were undergoing changes. In addition, many speech communities on the East Coast have existed in their present locations for centuries, while the interior of the country was settled by people from all regions of the existing United States and developed a far more general linguistic pattern. Studies on historical usage of English in the United States and the United Kingdom suggest that spoken American English did not simply evolve from period British English, but rather retained many archaic features contemporary British English has since lost. Most North American speech is rhotic, because in the 17th century, when English was brought to the Americas, most English in England was rhotic. Rhoticity has been further supported by the influences of Hiberno English, West Country English and Scottish English. In most varieties of North American English, the sound corresponding to the letter R is a post-alveolar approximant, or retroflex approximant, R, rather than a trill or tap. A unique bunched tongue variant of the approximant R sound is also associated with the United States, and seems particularly noticeable in the Midwest and South. The loss of the R sound after a vowel, known as non-rhoticity, is confined in the United States mostly to the accents of eastern New England, the former plantation South, metropolitan New York City, and the African American vernacular. Nowadays, the vowel-consonant cluster found in bird, work, hurt, learn, etc., usually retains its R pronunciation, even in otherwise non-rhotic accents. On the other hand, dropping of syllable final r may sometimes happen in natively rhotic dialects if r is located in unaccented syllables wherein the next syllable or word begins in a consonant. In England, the lost r was often changed into e, giving rise to a new class of falling diphthongs. Furthermore, the sound of fur or butter is realized in aim as a monophthongal r-colored vowel. This does not happen in the non-rhotic varieties of North American speech. Some other English changes in which most North American dialects do not participate. The realization of intervocalic t as a glottal stop. The only environment in which T-glottalization is standard in American English is before syllabic n, as in button, bn. On the other hand, North American English has undergone some sound changes not found in other varieties of English speech. The merger of and making father and bother rhyme. This change is in a transitional or completed stage nearly universally in North American English. Exceptions are in Northeastern New England English, such as the Boston accent, New York City English, Philadelphia English, Baltimore English, and many Southern dialects, such as the Yat dialect. The merger of and in many areas. This is the so-called cot-court merger, where cot and court are homophones. This change has occurred in eastern New England, in Pittsburgh and surrounding areas, and from the Great Plains westward. For speakers who do not merge court and cot, the replacement of the cot vowel with the court vowel in many cases before voiceless fricatives, as well as before n, usually in gone, often in on, and irregularly before. The from-rum merger consisting of the replacement of the lot vowel with the strut vowel in most utterances of the words was of, from, what, and in many utterances of the words everybody, nobody, somebody, anybody, the word because has either, or. This is directly due to influence of the Irish language. Want has normally, or sometimes, vowel merger before intervocalic. Which vowels are affected varies between dialects, but the merry, marry, merry, nearer, mirror, and hurry, furry mergers are found in many American English dialects. Americans vary slightly in the pronunciations of R-colored vowels, such as those in e and e, sometimes monophthongizing towards and or tensing towards e and I, respectively, causing pronunciations like p for pear, pear, and pie for peer, peer. Also, j is often reduced to j, so that cure, pure, and mature may all end with the sound, thus rhyming with blur and sir. The word sure is also part of this rhyming set, is commonly pronounced. Dropping of j is more extensive than in RP. In most North American accents, j is dropped after all alveolar and interdental consonant, so that new, duke, Tuesday, presume are pronounced new, duck, Tuesday, pisum, a, tensing in environments that vary widely from accent to accent. With most American speakers, for whom the phoneme a operates under a somewhat continuous system, a has both the tense and or-lax allophone. In these accents, a is overall realized before nasal stops as more tense, while other environments are more lax. For example, note the vowel sound in maize for mass, but mien for man. In some American accents, though, specifically those from Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York City, a and e are entirely separate phonemes. For example, in planet p lane t versus planet p lean t. This is often called the Mid-Atlantic splitter system. Note that these vowels move in the opposite direction in the mouth compared to the backed British broad a. The phenomenon has been noted as related to the increasingly rare phenomenon of older speakers of the eastern New England area who a to before f per second, theta, th, z, v, alone or when preceded by a homorganic nasal flapping of intervocalic t and d to alveolar tap r before unstressed vowels and syllabic l, as well as at the end of a word or morpheme before any vowel. Thus, for most speakers, pairs such as ladder, latter, metal, medal, and coding are pronounced the same, except with the stressed Canadian raising of Many speakers split the sound based on its presence before either a voiceless or voiced consonant, so that in writer it is pronounced but in rider it is pronounced This is a form of Canadian raising that, unlike more extreme forms of that process, does not affect in many areas and dialects, a phonemic distinction between what elsewhere become homophones through this process is maintained by vowel lengthening in the vowel preceding the formerly voiced consonant, e.g., r for writer as opposed to r for rider. T-glottalization is common when t is in the final position of a syllable or word, though this is always superseded by the aforementioned rules of flapping. Alveolarization. England's typical distinction between a clear L and a dark L is much less noticeable in nearly all dialects of American English. It may even be altogether absent. Instead, most U.S. speakers pronounce all L sounds with a tendency to be dark, meaning with some degree of velarization. The only notable exceptions to this are in some Spanish-influenced U.S. English varieties and in older, moribund, southern speech of the U.S., where L is clear in an intervocalic environment between front vowels. Both intervocalic, nt, and n, may commonly be realized as r, or simply n, making winter and winner homophones. In most areas where nt is reduced to n, it is accompanied further by nasalization of simple post-vocalic n, so that vnt and vn remain phonemically distinct. In such cases, the preceding vowel becomes nasalized, and is followed in cases where the former nt was present by a distinct n. This stop absorption by the preceding nasal n does not occur when the second syllable is stressed, as in entail. The Pimpin Merger occurs in certain areas, by which is raised to before nasal stops, making pairs like pen, pin homophonous. This merger originated in Southern American English but is now also sometimes found in parts of the Midwest and West as well, especially in people with roots in the mountainous areas of the southeastern United States. The vowel, in unstressed syllables, generally merges with e, so roses is pronounced like roses. Some mergers found in most varieties of both American and British English include merger of the vowels and o before r, making pairs like horse, horse, core, for, morning, morning, etc. Homophones. Wine, wine merger, making pairs like wine, wine, wet, wet, whales, whales, where, etc. Homophones, in most cases eliminating the voiceless labia vela fricative. Many older varieties of Southern and Western American English still keep to these distinct, but the merger appears to be spreading.